The Rich Rabbit.
Rolex is the most desired watch brand in the whole world. Even in the era of cell phones and smart watches, Rolex is a luxury that everyone dreams of. There can be no watch house less in need of an introduction than Rolex. It is a brand whose name echoes beyond the boundaries of our industry. Synonymous with luxury, interchangeable with quality, imbued with a heritage that no amount of money, spin, or PR stunts can synthesize, Rolex almost occupies its very own territory. Sometime during the last decade, the brand, founded over a century ago, has simply transmogrified. It is no longer just a watch brand, but rather a phenomenon. The rules do not apply to this relentless juggernaut as it rolls over all comers. No, when it comes to playing the game, Rolex has a distinct, insurmountable advantage. It pretty much wrote the entire rulebook. Rolex SA is the leading luxury watch manufacturer in the world, producing over 2,000 watches per day that generate sales of over $7 billion each year. The Switzerland-based company manufactures, services, and distributes wristwatches under the Rolex and Tudor brand through authorized dealers. The original name of the company was Wilsdorf and Davis, and in 1919, operations were relocated to Geneva, Switzerland. The brand today produces industry icons such as the Rolex Submariner, Daytona, and GMT-Master, and competes with other leading luxury watch companies like Patek Philippe, Omega, and Panerai, and sponsors many major sporting events in tennis, golf, yachting, and racing. To understand why Rolex has so much sway over the industry and the trends therein, we have to go back to the beginning. Back to the dawn of the 20th century and into the mind of a young entrepreneur who believed he had struck upon an idea that would put his fledgling company on the map. Rolex was founded in 1902 by Hans Wilsdorf and his brother-in-law Alfred Davis as Wilsdorf and Davis. He founded the watchmaking company in London, where they specialized in importing Hermann Eigler's quality movements and then placing them in quality watch cases made by companies such as Denison. The duo distributed the timepieces to jewelers that added their names to the wristwatches. Some of the earliest watches produced were often stamped with W&D on the inside of the caseback. 1908 was a big year for the company. Wilsdorf registered Rolex as a trademark and opened their first Switzerland office in La Chaux-de-Fonds. It has been said that Wilsdorf wanted his brand to be easy to pronounce in any language. The word Rolex was also said to sound like a watch being wound, according to Wilsdorf. In 1910, thanks to Wilsdorf's high standards and the excellence of Maison Eigler's output, a Rolex wristwatch became the first wristwatch to be awarded an independently ratified certificate of chronometric performance. The first such test took place in Bienne in Switzerland, nearby Maison Eigler. A Rolex watch was thus awarded a Class A precision certificate by the Kew Observatory in 1914. This was an exciting distinction, considering that normally the award was given exclusively to marine chronometers. It was the very first time a wristwatch had achieved this honor in England and paved the way for Rolex to become one of the most respected brands in the world for its chronometric performance. But Hans Wilsdorf was not satisfied with just timekeeping excellence. When he established his company in 1905, he had set out with a very clear goal to produce watches that were able to accompany their owner through the adventure of life. Although his watches kept excellent time throughout static chronometer tests, Wilsdorf wanted to ensure that they would continue to perform their primary function no matter their environment. Wartime taxes imposed on luxury items caused Wilsdorf to leave England in 1919. The levies on silver and gold, which were metals that were used in the production of Rolex watches, became too costly. Wilsdorf decided it would be beneficial to relocate to Geneva so that he could work more closely with his suppliers in Bienne. The Rolex brand moved with Wilsdorf settling down in Geneva, Switzerland as Rolex Watch Company. Later, the brand would become Rolex SA and finally Rolex SA. Wilsdorf had been creating watches for just 21 years before the seminal release of the Rolex Oyster case in 1926. It was to be a game-changing model. With that release, the company was at once placed on a stratospheric trajectory. Marketed as the world's first waterproof watch, the Oyster case was a revelation. Not only was it up to the prescribed task, but it also boasted an iconic aesthetic thanks to the fluted bezel and caseback. So confident in its ability to keep the inner workings of a movement dry was Wilsdorf that he implored famous channel swimmer Mercedes Gillietz to wear one around her neck on her ill-fated channel crossing attempt of 1927. Although Gillietz didn't make it to France on that occasion, the watch performed admirably, keeping excellent time throughout the entire swim and not allowing a single drop of water to ingress. 5 years later, Wilsdorf achieved his own personal holy grail, the creation of a self-winding wristwatch. 1931 saw the debut of the first Oyster Perpetual model, a model name that still graces many Rolex dials today. The combination of the water-resistant and dust-proof case, along with an automatic movement, secured Wilsdorf's finest creation a place in the pantheon of great watchmaking advancements. What followed over the next 50 years was a series of model releases that would go on to define the watchmaking landscape for a generation. Each release by the now storied brand became a classic. The 1940s brought us the prolific Datejust model, and less than a decade after the significant release, the Submariner followed in 1953. 2 years later, the first GMT-Master debuted. Before the decade was out, the Day-Date and the Milgauss had joined the Rolex ranks. Along with creating Rolex, Wilsdorf also founded the high-quality yet lower-priced Tudor brand of watches. This subsidiary company was founded in 1947. Wilsdorf continued to grow both companies and produce quality and innovative timepieces until his death in 1960. It is often possible for a brand to consume the reputation of its founder, but in the early years and even up until his death in 1960, Wilsdorf was an active, driving force within his company, and his personality was stamped on every product produced on his watch. The 60s got off to a bang with the launch of the Deep Sea Extra Special. Between those two aquatic releases, the very first Cosmograph Daytona hit the shelves in 1963. 1971 saw the release of the Explorer 2, the first of the two iconic updates to existing models in the catalog. The second such update came in 1982 with the release of the GMT-Master 2, which has gone on to be one of the most sought-after models produced by the brand. Since the heyday of the new model releases, the Yachtmaster, Pearlmaster, the Yachtmaster 2, the Deep Sea, the Datejust 2, and the Sky Dweller have also joined the party. These modern Rolex watches, designed for a new age, utilize Rolex's high-quality materials and in-house movements and are a testament to the know-how accumulated through years of craft and a tireless desire to innovate. As they say, innovation is the key, and in Rolex's case, it was all innovation. Now let's summarize their journey in few short points just to show you how much part innovation played in their case. In 1910, it became the first wristwatch to receive the Swiss Certificate of Chronometric Precision. And in 1926, Rolex had another breakthrough by inventing and producing the first waterproof wristwatch. From this watch was born the famous Oyster collection, which is still being produced to this day. In 1945, they produced the first watch to have an automatic date on the watch dial. Then in 1954, they made the first timepiece to display 2 time zones. Trust me, it was a big deal back then. In 1956, the day date is born as first watch to display both day and date on dial. And 8 years back in 2012, they made the first wristwatch to have a command bezel designed for multiple uses. Another thing which sets them apart is their design consistency. Rolex is renowned for making only incremental and conservative changes to their watch designs, and the aesthetics have remained remarkably consistent. One could argue that Rolex's 20th century designs set such an enduring aesthetic standard that Rolex simply never needed to change things up. One could also argue that because mechanical wristwatches have been categorically anachronistic for about 5 decades, the unchanged look of Rolex watches has played perfectly into the rising trend toward retro-style timepieces. However, a look at any other watch brand tells us that Rolex's strict adherence to the design legacy is unique among most mass producers of watches. Blancpain, which actually issued the first dive watch, the 50 Fathoms, 1 year ahead of Rolex, changed up its design according to the trends of the 1970s. A move that eventually shrunk Blancpain's stature in the dive watch market to the point where the model was dropped from the catalog. In 2007, Blancpain revived the 50 Fathoms in its original form, and these retro-style models have now become a catalog staple. Audemars Piguet, or AP, issued the Royal Oak in the 70s, setting off a trend for luxurious steel sports watches that saw traditionalists like IWC and Patek Philippe chasing down this emerging market, with the Ingenue and the Nautilus respectively. Rolex responded by upping production of the Submariner, GMT-Master and Daytona, but adhered to only making incremental mechanical improvements and modest tweaks to the original designs. Trends in dress watches began shifting rapidly in the 1990s, and Rolex did nearly nothing to respond, keeping most models as recognizable as ever. The Cellini line, however, remains an exception within the Rolex catalog, seeing a great deal of avant-garde designs come and go over the years, especially for women's models. Yet, the Cellini line remains Rolex's least celebrated, least recognizable, and least collectible. We can say the same for Rolex Oyster Quartz models which appeared in the 1970s. Whenever Rolex followed a trend, they produced relatively forgettable watches. But when Rolex stuck to their core designs, they made what have become some of the most collectible and popular timepieces. This is especially true of Rolex's steel professional models, which were produced in relatively low quantities and, despite their ever-rising popularity, remained scarce. In the end, Rolex is the real definition of superiority, and it is a class apart without any doubts. It is a luxury that everyone dreams of, but only a lucky few can get their hands on it. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon. Do see other interesting videos on our channel related to other top quality brands.